Millionaire leaves his safe, open to trap his maid, but her reaction left him in tears. The mansion was quiet that morning, almost too quiet. Golden sunlight streamed through the enormous glass windows, bouncing off chandeliers that sparkled like stars frozen in time. Mr. Harrison, the man who owned it all, sat alone in his study, a half-empty cup of coffee resting on the edge of his mahogany desk. The aroma had already gone bitter, but his mind was too restless to notice. Wealth surrounded him, rare paintings, handcrafted furniture, shelves lined with books that cost more than most people's yearly salaries. Yet inside, he felt something missing, something he didn't dare admit even to himself: peace. Suspicion had been his companion for as long as he could remember. Every business partner he had ever trusted had eventually let greed consume them. Friends turned into rivals, promises into broken deals, and every betrayal left a scar deeper than the one before. So when it came to people who worked for him, trust was a luxury he never gave. His staff were paid well, treated fairly, but they were never allowed into the walls of his heart. He kept them at a distance, as if protecting himself from the sting of another wound. Recently, however, one person had begun to unsettle that belief: Elena. She was quiet, almost invisible in the mansion's vastness, moving from room to room, with the grace of someone who carried humility like a crown. She never asked for anything, never complained, and always seemed grateful for the smallest kindness: a smile, a thank you, even an extra loaf of bread from the kitchen. And that bothered him, because in his world, people always wanted more. One night, as he sat alone with his glass of wine, the thought gnawed at him: could anyone truly be so pure? Or was she just waiting for the right moment? The doubt grew louder with each passing day, until it became unbearable. He needed to know the truth, not because Elena had given him a reason to doubt, but because his own heart no longer trusted anyone. That morning, while the staff prepared breakfast in the kitchen, Harrison walked into his private study. Against the far wall stood a black safe taller than a man, its heavy steel door gleaming in the light. Inside, treasures slept quietly. Stacks of crisp $100 bills, gold coins, watches with diamonds glinting like frozen raindrops, and a necklace his late wife once adored but never wore. It was wealth enough to tempt even the most disciplined soul. With deliberate care, he turned the lock and swung the safe wide open, leaving it gaping like a silent invitation. He didn't bother to rearrange the contents neatly. In fact, he left the bundles of cash slightly undone, as if someone had just touched them, as if to whisper, "Take me if you dare." Then, moving with the precision of a man who had done this many times before, Harrison checked the corners of the room. The cameras he had installed were tiny, their lenses hidden within the carved woodwork. No one would suspect. He sat at his desk, adjusting the screen on his laptop to show the hidden camera feed. The angle was perfect. Anyone who entered would be seen approaching the safe. His heart pounded as if preparing for war. It struck him as strange, the thrill that coursed through him. He told himself it was about protection, about making sure no one could betray him again. But deep down, in a place he refused to acknowledge, it felt more like he was craving the confirmation that his worldview was correct, that honesty was a myth and everyone had a price. If Elena reached for the cash, he would sigh and tell himself, "I knew it. I was right about people all along." Time moved slowly in the silence. The mansion seemed to breathe with him, waiting for the moment. He sat back in his chair, tapping, his fingers on the desk, glancing every few seconds at the screen. His eyes carried both suspicion and a strange hunger to be proven right. He told himself he would not be surprised no matter what happened. And yet, beneath the mask of the hardened millionaire, there was a flicker of something else, a fragile hope he wouldn't admit, a hope that maybe, just maybe, Elena would walk into that room, see the open safe, and leave it untouched. That, somewhere in this world, honesty still lived. But men like Harrison did not allow hope to linger. He swallowed it quickly, convincing himself the trap was necessary, that it was nothing more than business. After all, What was trust if not the most dangerous gamble of all? So, with his heart guarded but restless, the millionaire leaned closer. To the glowing screen, his eyes locked on the door. Somewhere, in the vast mansion, Elena's footsteps echoed faintly on the marble floor. The test had begun. The door to the study opened with a soft creak, the kind that lingers in the air longer than it should. Elena stepped inside, holding a small feather duster in her hand. She wore the same plain uniform she always did, her dark hair tied back, neatly, her face calm but tired from the early morning chores. To her, this was just another room to clean, another corner of the enormous mansion that seemed far too big for one man. Her eyes swept the shelves in the desk, ready to begin her work, when something caught her attention. The safe. Its heavy steel door stood wide open, exposing treasures that most people only ever saw in magazines or behind bulletproof glass. She froze mid-step, her breath catching in her chest. For a moment, the world seemed to go silent around her. The stacks of crisp bills looked unreal in their perfection. Watches gleamed with diamonds, their faces catching the light like fragments of the sun. And at the center, a necklace shimmered so beautifully that it almost seemed alive, each gem reflecting a rainbow of colors. Elena's eyes lingered, not with hunger, but with a kind of aching sadness. Slowly, she set the duster down on the desk and moved closer to the safe. Her reflection appeared faintly in the polished steel, her face pale and her eyes weary. She took a step forward, then stopped, her hands hovering in the air as if afraid that even being near it might stain her soul. Her throat tightened. She whispered softly to herself, as though speaking only to God. Why? Why would this be left open? Her hand trembled as she touched her chest, where beneath the fabric of her uniform, she carried a small folded photograph of her son. She pulled it out gently, the edges worn from being held too many times. The picture showed a boy with a frail smile, his eyes bright despite the weakness in his body. His illness had stolen his strength, and medicine was the only thing keeping him alive. Medicine Elena could barely afford. Her gaze flickered back to the money. Just a single bundle would be enough to cover months of treatment. Just one shining watch could buy a future she prayed for every night. The temptation was sharp, cutting through her heart with cruel precision. She took another step toward the safe, tears already forming in her eyes. But then she stopped. Her knees buckled beneath her, and she sank to the cold marble floor. She placed the photograph of her son on her lap and covered her face with her hands. Her voice came out broken, trembling. God, you know my boy needs medicine. You know I don't have enough. You know my heart is weak right now. But I can't take what isn't mine. Please, give me strength. Tears fell silently, soaking into the hem of her uniform. She rocked slightly where she sat, clutching the photo close as though it were the only anchor keeping her from drowning. The mansion's silence was heavy, but Elena's words carried through it like a prayer. She reached out toward the safe, not to take anything, but to push the heavy door closed. With both hands, she pressed against the cold steel, until it shut with a soft, final thud. The sound echoed like a vow sealed in heaven. She leaned her forehead against the safe for a moment, breathing heavily, as though she had just fought the fiercest battle of her life. Her tears still fell, but there was a strange peace in them now, a peace that came from choosing integrity over desperation. Gathering herself, she wiped her face quickly, picked up the duster again, and began to clean the desk as though nothing had happened. She even whispered, almost apologetically, "I'm sorry. I just needed a moment. I can't let weakness take me away from who I am." Her hands shook as she worked, but she forced herself to keep moving, dusting gently, organizing books, wiping away invisible specks of dust. To anyone else, it was ordinary cleaning. But for Elena, it was the quiet reclaiming of her dignity, proof to herself that even in the face of temptation, her heart remained unbroken. What she didn't know was that hidden eyes were watching her every move. Behind the glow of a monitor, the millionaire sat frozen, unable to blink, unable to breathe properly. He had expected greed. He had expected betrayal. But what he saw was something he hadn't witnessed in years, purity, faith, and a strength that no amount of money could buy. And as Elena placed the photograph back into her pocket and whispered another small prayer under her breath, the millionaire's world began to shift. Something inside him cracked open, something he thought had died long ago. The sound of footsteps broke the silence. Elena startled, straightening her back, her hands still clutching the duster. She turned slowly, and there he was, Mr. Harrison, standing in the doorway. For a moment, neither of them moved. The grand chandelier above sent streams of light across his face, and in his eyes, something unusual flickered, something Elena had never seen before. Vulnerability. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. She hurried to wipe her tears with the back of her hand, lowering her gaze as though ashamed that he had caught her in such a fragile moment. I'm sorry, sir," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to waste time. I'll get back to work." But Harrison didn't answer right away. His throat felt dry, his chest heavy. He had prepared himself for anger, for disappointment, for the bitter satisfaction of proving himself right. Instead, what he had just witnessed pierced through every wall he had built around his heart. Slowly, he stepped into the room, his footsteps echoing softly against the marble floor. "Elena," he finally said, his voice lower than usual, almost broken. Why didn't you take anything?" She froze, unsure if it was a trick question. Her eyes lifted for just a second, then fell back down to the floor. "Because it's not mine," she said simply. "Temptation comes to everyone, sir. But I was raised to believe that honesty is the only wealth that never leaves us." Her words struck him harder than any betrayal ever had. Honesty is the only wealth that never leaves us. The phrase circled in his mind like a haunting melody, tearing at the loneliness he had been hiding beneath his riches. He stepped closer, his eyes glistening. "Elena, I need to confess something to you." He paused, swallowing hard. "I left that safe open, on purpose. I wanted to see what you would do." Her eyes widened in shock. You tested me?" "Yes," he whispered, his voice trembling. I thought you would take something. I wanted to believe I was right, that no one could be trusted, that everyone had a price." His lips pressed together and his hands shook as he added, "But I was wrong. You proved me wrong. And I don't know whether to feel ashamed or grateful." Elena's heart sank. She felt exposed, her private struggle laid bare. "Sir," she said softly, "I am just doing my job. I didn't pass a test. I only followed my conscience." Tears gathered in Harrison's eyes, and before he could stop them, one rolled down his cheek. He turned toward the safe, reached inside, and pulled out the necklace. Its jewels caught the light, scattering colors across the room. He walked over to her and placed it gently into her hands. "For your son," he said, his voice breaking. "This isn't payment. This is gratitude for reminding me that not all hearts are for sale." Elena gasped, shaking her head quickly. "No, sir, I can't take this. It's too much. I would never—" But Harrison raised a hand to stop her. "Please," he said firmly but gently, "let me do this. You have given me something I thought I had lost forever. Trust. Don't deny me the chance to give something back." Her eyes brimmed with tears as she looked down at the necklace in her trembling hands. She didn't see wealth. She didn't see jewels. She saw medicine, hospital bills paid, and her son's laughter returning. She pressed the necklace to her chest, not out of greed, but out of gratitude so deep it hurt. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You don't know what this means." Harrison's shoulders softened. For years, he had lived in a mansion filled with riches, but starved of warmth. That day, watching a maid's honesty, he felt something return to him that no money could ever buy: faith in humanity. The silence in the study no longer felt cold. Instead, it carried a strange warmth, as though the walls themselves had absorbed the exchange and blessed it. Elena bowed her head, still holding the necklace close, and Harrison wiped the last of his tears with the back of his hand. When she finally walked out of the study, the air seemed lighter, as though something invisible had been lifted from both their shoulders. Harrison remained standing by the safe, staring at the closed door. For the first time in many years, he whispered a prayer of his own. Not for money, not for success, but for the strength to be a man worthy of the trust he had just been given. That night, the mansion no longer felt like a prison of wealth. It felt alive. And though the safe was locked once again, Harrison knew that the greatest treasure he possessed was not inside it. It was the honesty of a woman who had walked away from temptation and left him with tears of redemption. In the bin, and the millionaire had set a trap, but it was his own heart that was caught. He had left his safe open to prove that honesty was a myth, that greed lived in every soul. But Elena's tears, her whispered prayers, and her refusal to take what wasn't hers broke through the walls he had built around himself. She walked away with nothing but dignity in her hands, yet she left behind a priceless gift, a reminder that trust, integrity, and faith are treasures richer than gold. And as the mansion grew quiet that night, Mr. Harrison realized that sometimes the poorest in possessions carry the wealthiest hearts. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspirational short stories that touch the soul.